Hello friends, welcome back to Biotech Simplified. Today we will discuss the difference between phenotype as well as genotype. Earlier I have done a video both on phenotype as well as genotype. Please do watch them. So now let us start from the very beginning, that is from the definition of both phenotype as well as genotype. So what is phenotype? Phenotype refers to all the observable traits in an organism. That is, all the observable traits, that is height of a person or eye color in a person, all these are known as phenotype. Whereas genotype is the genetic makeup in an organism. That is, it consists of all the heritable genes that is present in an organism. So phenotype is the observable traits, whereas genotypes is the genetic makeup of an organism. So a phenotype is a result of the genotype with its environment. So phenotype is the result of genotype when it interacts with the environment. So this is the basic difference between a phenotype and a genotype. Let us take an example to explain the definition of genotype and phenotype. So as we discussed earlier, phenotype is the observable trait. So in this example, let us say that phenotype is the straight wing or the wrinkled wing. So in the case of the fly, if the straight wings is present, it is having a genotype which is small s and small s. Whereas in the case of wrinkled wings, that is, if the fly is having a wrinkled wing, then the genotype of the wrinkled wing is small w and small w. So this is the difference of genotype as well as phenotype. That is, phenotype is the observable trait, whereas genotype is the genetic makeup, that is, it is present within the chromosome. So on the basis of the observable, let us differentiate phenotype with genotype. So phenotypes are observable traits. As we discussed earlier, phenotypes are observable traits, whereas these genotypes are present within the chromosomes and hence they cannot be observed. So phenotypes are observable, whereas genotypes are not observable. So, phenotype is the observable trait of an organism, whereas genotype is the genetic makeup. Next, let us discuss based on the heritability. So, phenotypes are not heritable, whereas genotypes are partly heritable. And this is because during a sexual reproduction, one of the two alleles are being transferred to the offspring. So, we can say that genotypes are partly inherited, whereas phenotypes are not inherited. So now let us discuss the fourth difference between them. That is, phenotype consists of various traits like physical form and structure, its development and behavior, its biological and physiological properties, and even the products of the organism. Whereas the genotype consists of hereditary characteristics of an organism, and this may be or may not be passed to the next generation. So now let us discuss what is the phenotype as well as genotype is affected by. So as we discussed earlier too, phenotype is a result of the genotype and the environmental condition. So phenotype is affected by the genotype as well as the environmental conditions. Whereas in the case of genotype, it is affected by the genetic composition of an individual, and this is affected by the sexual reproduction. So heritable mutations are also affected in the case of genotype. So In the case of phenotype, it is the genotype as well as environmental conditions, whereas in the case of genotype, it is the genetic composition as well as the heritable mutations. So let us discuss how these phenotype as well as genotypes are determined by. So in the case of phenotype, it is easily determined since it is observable trait. So for example, if we take height of an individual, we can easily understand whether the individual is tall or short. So the phenotypes are easily identified. Whereas in the case of genotype, since it is not an observable trait and since genotype is the genetic makeup of an organism, it is difficult to be determined. So we use techniques like PCR as well as RFLP. Now let us discuss the difference based on the environmental factors. So based on the environment factors, we can see that phenotypes are affected by environmental factors, whereas genotypes are not affected by environmental factors. We can also differentiate them based on the changes. So phenotype might change during a lifetime of an individual. For example, we can say color of a hair. Whereas genotypes remain the same throughout the entire life of an individual. So genotype plus the environment results in the phenotype. So genotype plus the environment give rise to the phenotype. Now let us end these differentiation based on examples on both phenotype as well as genotype. So examples of phenotype is seen in various organisms which include blood group, eye color, hair texture, and genetic diseases in humans, pod size, and even color of leaves, beak of birds. Now let us discuss the examples of genotype. So capital T is homozygous allele for height, whereas capital T small t is heterozygous allele for height. So now let us discuss another example. So capital B is homozygous allele for eye color, and capital B small b is heterozygous allele for eye color. So let us quickly differentiate genotype with phenotype. So DNA is the genotype. So in the case of DNA, the genes tells the body how to do things, as thumbprint as well as height are phenotypes. So in the case of thumbprint, the body organizes based on what the gene says, and in the case of height, the body grows based on what the gene says. So DNA is the genotype, whereas thumbprint as well as height is what the phenotype is. So we can say that phenotype face the world, whereas genotype plan for phenotypes. Hope you find this video interesting as well as informative. For more such videos, do subscribe to Biotech Simplified. If you like the channel, please like and share with your friends. See you soon in another video.